I'm going to get into the specifics in a moment, but I want to get back to this idea of integrated manufacturing. It seems to be taking hold in many forms across the board, across industries, across verticals. What problem then is First Residence helping manufacturers solve, I guess, across their own technology stacks?
Absolutely. So, over the past 10 years, we've seen an incredible rise and excitement around, for example, IIoT or industrial Internet of Things. While the promise is great of an increasing number of devices and sensors having Wi-Fi connectivity, really getting that data back into the business systems or the operational systems is kind of an unsolved problem. And the reason for that is a lot of those business systems and operational systems weren't built to receive in data from a highly distributed array of sensors and equipment. So when it comes to integrated manufacturing and Industry 4.0, the promise has been really high, but actually stitching this data back into that business systems layer or the operational layer has been unmet. Ion, very specifically, has been developed with an API first approach. What that means is that every single transaction in the platform, what's available through the UI or what's available through various app ecosystem partners, et cetera, are all available through the API. And as we see an increasingly programmatic workforce, people that know just a little bit of code to move, bits and bytes around, we've created a layer to make it very easy for them to get, that information from those sensors or that equipment back into the same layer that operators and technicians are working on, the same layer that people are analyzing their factories on, so that you could really stitch, this wide array of data back into, the traditional kind of manufacturing process, the left to right motion of how do you build a product.
Okay, that's great. So tell me again, so it's an open API based, right? So tell me a little bit more about the specs and what would be needed to have your, I guess, your a basic integration that you would look at.
Yeah, great question. So about 15 years ago, there was a huge trend in standardization of APIs, specifically REST APIs. And since then, there's been a few evolutions of that, including GraphQL. GraphQL is a API spec that defines the structure in which one can retrieve data from a system, as well as send data back. That's the spec that we have adopted into the Ion API. And because it's a standardized API, and because of the power of GraphQL, the API is actually self-documenting. So within the platform, we've created an API playground that allows manufacturing, kind of programmers, engineers, et cetera, people that are working in the manufacturing operation to quickly test interactions with the API, understand how to get data out of the system for automated kind of decision making or running an automated process like a robotics process you could imagine, and then sending data back, things like numerical results, measurements, things like that. It's all built within that API playground, so they could quickly test it and then bring that into their code. And their code, what we've seen as well, right, is there's been a burst of capabilities for developers, whether the developer is writing in JavaScript, Python, or something more low level, like even at the PLC level in a manufacturing environment, they can actually interact with Ion in the same standard API spec as web developers do today building the internet.
Okay, so it makes me think about this idea of, institutional knowledge, which has long been the bane for manufacturers in facing skills shortages or labor shortages, and capturing data or rich data for that matter can help them that will help them pass along the torch. It's never been more relevant. So can you talk about how maybe one or two use cases? I've looked at your website, you've got some interesting examples. I'm hoping you'll share some with us and demonstrate how you're able to collect and use historical data and that's perhaps used for certification or troubleshooting or handover to engineers. And it's certainly our audiences are multidisciplinary, but I really want to focus on the engineering bit.
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example. At a company called Vast Space, they're building large scale, space applications. You could think of things like space stations and other kind of various applications there. What they use Ion for, on the surface, it's to conduct the day-to-day operations in manufacturing. Things like defining work instructions, defining the routing of how a factory is going to work, as well as the data that they need collected back from the manufacturing operation. That's kind of the main use case. The amazingly exciting thing about working with a company like VAS is that they have an increasingly programmatic workforce, like I was mentioning earlier, right? Manufacturing engineers or mechanical engineers who are able to write just enough code to start automating things. Now, this is really, I think, a great example of that technical side coming in to play with the business side. In applications like aerospace, like what Vast is working in, data traceability is paramount. For things like quality control and quality audits, as well as, like you mentioned, Rihanna, certification processes of having traceability around the entire build for something as complex as an aerospace part. So using the combination of the platform, they're able to set up their factory processes, collect data, as well as automate that data collection to create an entire build record at the end of the hardware build, to quickly diagnose their manufacturing process where necessary, but also to have the supporting documentation for regulatory purposes. A lot of our customers that are in aerospace use Ion to be the system of record to capture this data across their entire process, whether that's manually input data from the technician or operator, or this automatically collected data like I was describing before. At the end, you get out a data package that gives you confidence on exactly how your hardware product was built to spec, and something that they can hand off to regulators like the FAA or the Space Force to certify and continue moving their product forward into the operational side.
It's a very exciting time. So thank you very much for sharing your insights, Karan Talati, CEO of First Resonance. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.